Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Are you looking for a designer to help you with your next product or startup? When I'm not working on the show, I'm busy working as an award-winning chief design officer and have been doing software design for startups and other companies for over 20 years. I'm also a published author and recently sold a startup to a multi-billion-dollar company. For more information, visit kevinhorek.com. That is KEVINHOREK.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Christian Lanng. He's the co-founder and CEO at Tradeshift. Christian, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's awesome to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think what you guys are doing at Tradeshift is actually really innovative and cool. But maybe before we get into that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
So I'm from Denmark. So if you're not that familiar with geography, Northern Europe.
Sure.
And I moved to the West Coast. I moved to San Francisco 9 years ago. So I've been living in California ever since.
Very cool.
And if you ever tried the Danish winters once, you'll also probably realize I'm never going back.
Sure. So you went to university. What did you take and why?
So I actually did my first startup before I went to university. So right after high school, it was 99, and
okay.
I knew how to program, and it's a really fun time. So we started a company. We had a lot of fun. Ended up selling it in 2001, and then after that, my mom was like, "You got to have an education, Christian." So I chose to study sociology.
Okay.
And the reason was actually pretty simple. I felt like I knew a lot about technology. I knew a lot about programming, computers, software. But I had this hunch that most of the internet and technology would actually be more about people than the technology and how people connect. So that was my reason for studying sociology.
Interesting. So you get out of university. Well, you also got a master's, correct?
I got a bachelor, and then I dropped out before I had to hand in my master thesis. So I have a master minus 2 weeks.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So what made you kind of drop out?
Well, so for the first 3 years, obviously really focused on my studies. Then for the second half of my studies, I got involved in working with a huge project at the time that the Danish government was driving around, moving a lot of infrastructure and payments to cloud.
Okay.
And, that really grew, and it became sort of almost like a national platform for payments between companies. And we thought that was really exciting. So I, probably one of the very few people in the world who ever left my master thesis to go work for the government, but I did.
Interesting. Okay, so walk me through the rest of your career up until being co-founder of and CEO of Tradeshift.
Yeah, well, so the project we were working on, and the reason I dropped out was really the very first peer-to-peer trade and payment protocol in the world. This was way before blockchain.
Interesting.
And we didn't have all of the cryptographic, really cool stuff people are doing with blockchain today, but we had a simple peer-to-peer mechanism. You can sort of compare it to how Napster came before, BitTorrent, and a little bit the same. We built that for trade and payments to make trade easier for companies. And we went on to build something similar for the European Union, which was a massive project, right? I mean, 27 countries, hundreds of thousands of companies and billions of dollars in transactions. Did that with a core team that I've been working with ever since. We decided that with all of the knowledge we had and all of the exciting stuff we built, all of us had previously had startups. So we decided to go and jump out and thought of yet another startup, and that became Tradeshift. That's exactly 10 years ago.
Wow, congrats, man. That's huge.
Yeah, and so I was joking the other day, I pretty much done startups since I was 19 years old. And then, I probably was just really bad at having a boss, I think. But it's been a lot of fun, and it's been a great ride. And, with Tradeshift, it's bigger than ever.
Okay, interesting. No, that's great. So what exactly does Tradeshift do, and how has it kind of evolved over the last decade?
So I think when we started out, right, we, as young people, we were looking at all of this software that was being used to connect companies, and it was super complicated, very, very expensive. If you're, let's say, a company in China who wanted to do business with a huge company in Europe, you'd have to spend millions of dollars of software, of consultants, and all of these things just to connect and do business. And you can almost think about that like a tax on the economy as a whole.
Okay.
And what we saw very early on is, this is not at all aligned with how consumers are doing business, right? As consumers, we're using LinkedIn, later Twitter, later Instagram. It was super easy to connect, super easy to share, super easy to collaborate. So our thesis for Tradeshift very early on was, why don't we build networks for companies like they're built for consumers, rather than trying to do all of this old school legacy stuff? So in a way, we looked at Facebook, we looked at LinkedIn, and we used that as a model and kind of created what you could almost call a social network for companies. And that's when we launched 10 years ago. And the mission back then was, let's connect all of the companies in the world. And guess what? The mission today is still, let's connect all of the companies in the world. So haven't really changed at all. Obviously, we have a lot more capital, a lot more people, a lot more customers with us on the journey, but we stuck to this, I think, really big idea, and it's still very exciting to work on.
No, very cool. So give us some examples of how companies use Tradeshift.
So, one example is if you're a company that's manufacturing or selling stuff somewhere in the world and you're looking for more customers, you're looking for more business, you can go join the Tradeshift Network, you can sign up, you can create a profile, and you can then go look for customers in other countries and connect with them. The reverse is also true. You might be a huge company, let's say like, Unilever, or DHL, or UPS, or something similar, and you have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of suppliers all over the world, and it's a huge mess to try to manage all of these companies that you're doing business with. And you might use our software to go and invite them to join your network. So you almost create like a private network on our platform where you're connected with all of your business partners, and you can manage all of that trade with them, meaning, everything that goes into an order, inventory, payments around it, and, everything that comes after. So in a way, we just a platform that allowed these companies to connect and then trade together. And of course, when companies trade, there's a lot of steps, right? There's a lot of processes that needs to happen. And what we try to do is to make them as simple as possible and have them in the background so you can actually focus on the humans connecting and making that easier and not spending your time on really boring stuff like figuring out if an invoice matches a purchase order or something like that.
Okay, interesting. So then, are you guys basically building in a bunch of third-party integrations into your software to handle some of that stuff, or walk us through that?
Yeah, so, if you go back 15 years, 20 years, as I just said, it was super expensive to connect two companies. It would cost a lot of money because their systems would have to be connected and learn to talk together. One of the inventions I think we've done, or one of the big innovations, is really to use sort of cloud software and use super advanced machine learning and other things to make it simple and easy and fast to connect companies. So you don't need to be a programmer to figure out how to connect with a huge company to do business with them. Our software sort of takes care of all of that in the background, and we have profiles for all of these different business systems, and then we have some software that pretty much can take care of the mapping between them automatic. So if you have a company and you need to do business with another company and it all needs to happen electronically instead of paper, our software can pretty much do that on the fly. You don't need to go and invest months and months of your life in figuring out that's going to happen or hire some consultants that are super expensive to do it.
Sure. Well, and then, like, maybe this is a bad example, but if I just do business, say, in the States, but I'm looking to expand to another country, just the fact that you guys integrate with the apps in that other country is going to save me an astronomical amount of time because I don't have to worry about building those kind of integrations into my own platform. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think on top of that, think about it as a network. Think about how you would use Facebook or something else, right? So
Okay.
we have 350,000 companies just in the Western countries. We have more than 2 million companies globally on the platform.
Wow.
And in 190 countries, right? So if you want to go do business in China, apart from just, going and helping you make those integrations easily, we have a huge community of companies that you can go engage with. You say, hey, we're looking for parts maybe to go manufacture this gadget that we want to sell on Kickstarter, or we're doing something else. And all of these companies are there and say, hey, we can actually do this for you, and here's what we've done elsewhere, and so on. So it's much more than just taking care of the technical stuff. We actually think that's the boring stuff.
Okay.
We think it's much more about how can we help you grow your business by getting access to this market in a way that's much easier and with much less friction, right?
Sure.
And we are hyper global. Yeah, so go on. We are hyper global today, right? I mean, if you go back 10, 15 years, the idea that I would go to China and source some things from my gadget, or Malaysia, or sell something in LATAM was very foreign. But pretty much, all people today in business or in startups or entrepreneurs, etc., it's a global generation, right? We expect to eat global foods. We expect to have access to global components, build our businesses globally from the start. So I think that's super exciting. In a way, that's what we're helping empower.
No, I love that. That's the thing that, like, it still kind of blows me away that some businesses or individuals or both don't think of their business being something that could potentially be provided in other parts of the world. Unless you're doing something really specific to a geographical region, most businesses can try to find clients or companies or partners in other parts of the world, right? So I love how you guys basically bridge that gap.
Yeah, and think about it as consumers, right? With the iPhone or Android or whatever, with your smartphone, every niche became an app. Like if you are into horses, there's a social network, I'm for sure, for horses, right? Or whatever you're into, you can explore that, right? But if you have a business, let's say you have a fashion business in LA, you're a small boutique maker of maybe, let's say, cowboy boots, and you have a little market, everybody knows your name. Well, in today's world, there might be a market 100 times the size of what you're doing in China, in Mexico, in all of these other countries. But as a small, maybe manufacturer, boutique of something, how do you go and start selling your stuff in China? This is pretty daunting, right? How do I get access to finance, storage, all of that stuff? And our platform can literally take care of all of that end to end.
Okay, so maybe walk us through that process a little bit. So if I'm new to Tradeshift, I come to the site, walk me through how I get onboarded and actually start using the platform.
So you can get onto the platform in two ways. So one is the primary way, and then there's a secondary. So the primary way you get onto the platform is you get invited by one of our large customers to join.
Okay.
So a lot of companies, they never heard about Tradeshift before, and then they get an invite from, let's say, DHL, which is, of course, a global logistics company, and say, hey, in the future, we would like to do all our business with you on Tradeshift, right? So it's a little bit like getting an invite to join LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever it is. So you get this invite, you go join, you set up an account, and you start out being connected with, DHL. So that's your first connection, a little bit like when we all had MySpace and we only had one friend on MySpace to start with, right?
Right.
But then as you use the platform, as you do more business with DHL and we learn about your business, we can suggest other businesses for you to connect with. We can suggest other business partners. And you can also go and search. You can look for products on our marketplaces, or you can start uploading your products on other marketplaces to get seen by somebody else.
Okay. Do they have to be physical products? Can they be digital? Can they be both? Or walk us through that.
Yeah, it can be services. It can be physical goods. It can be inventory. I mean, it can really be anything, right? I mean, I would say probably 30% of our volume is services.
Okay.
So there's really no sort of limitation to what you can trade on the platform, right? And we're trading. I mean, just last quarter we processed more than $70 billion, right? So
wow, that's huge. Congrats, man.
Yeah, thank you. It's pretty large volumes, right? I mean, it's up there. It's getting close to where somebody like Amazon, for instance, is. Of course, Amazon is mostly B2C, right? And we focus only on B2B. We think that's part of the world we understand, right?
Sure. So you mentioned people sell kind of services on there as well. What types of services do people kind of sell or trade on the platform?
So that could be legal services, right? You could be a lawyer in Sweden and know everything about business law in Sweden, and some company is trying to do a contract there and they're looking for a contract that can do that. It can be temporary worker agencies like Manpower and other big ones that are simply on the platform. And if you're looking for services, you can trade that straight away. Or it can be a boutique entrepreneur that is doing everything from, I'll take an example I actually saw recently, somebody who is specialized in building 3D printing mock-ups of components that you're trying to build. And the whole service is just not to produce the actual physical mock-up, but to do the design for you. So you might have an idea of, let's say, a new device, again, going back to the Kickstarter example you want to make, but you're not you're not somebody who knows how to do all of this sort of, visual design, and there might be a service maker that can do that for you and completely mock it up, and then, help you manage the relationship with whoever in China is going to build it for you, right? So I would say we've seen everything from cutting the grass all the way up to huge legal companies providing their services to large Fortune 500 companies on the platform.
Interesting. No, that's really cool. So if I'm a company, then how do I get on Tradeshift?
So if you don't get invited by a big customer, I mean, the simplest way is actually just to go to tradeshift.com and click sign up, and it will ask you a bunch of questions. What's your business? What industry are you in? What products do you offer? Where are you from? What are you looking for? And that's the very easiest way to get started.
Very cool. So I'm curious though, how do I actually connect with others? Like you mentioned, you recommend other companies as I'm using the platform, but is it like a true social network where I can kind of connect with random companies and people, or how does that kind of work?
Yeah, so you can go search, right? So you can say, hey, I'm looking for legal services. I'm looking for temp labor. And the network will essentially show you, okay, and you can put filters on to say, oh, I want to look for somebody who's, just right around me. I want to look at somebody who's in China, wherever. And that will give you a list of companies. And you can literally just connect with them. You can write them and say, hey, I'm looking to do this. And just like, from almost any other platform, you can start collaborating with them and figuring out what is it they do. And companies are actually fairly, responsive on the platform. So yeah, I think that's probably pretty much the best way of getting started. We will do some recommendations once we learn a little bit more about your business. And another way to do it is you can either go look at there's some big public marketplaces you can go join where it can be specialized. So it can be like, marketplace for electronics or services or something else. You can go join, you can look at everybody who's on that marketplace, or you can go and if you want to sell something, you can start offering your services on some of these marketplaces. And what's really cool about it is it's not like what you know from Amazon, where there's only one global marketplace. There might be very many different ones. There can be some that's run by big companies that are looking for very specific services. There can be public ones that just run and operated by somebody who has a passion for a certain industry. And some of them are invite only, so they require you to fulfill certain criteria, maybe having a certain volume, having, a certain amount of business you've already done, right? So there's many different ways to sort of explore the network and get connected with us.
Interesting. So you guys have these enterprise solution apps. What exactly are those, and how are they similar and different to what we've been talking about so far?
So what I kind of just described so far has sort of been the functionality of, let's call it the generic network and the platform and what it does for everyone.
Sure.
But if you're one of our large customers, right, you have every single problem I described, but you have it multiplied by 50,000.
Sure.
Because you have 50,000 global suppliers and I don't know how many countries. So you have big issues like, how do I make sure I'm tax compliant with the trade that I'm doing in China? How do I make sure that I'm paying out my money from the right bank accounts and that I'm earning the right return in my working capital and so on? So we have this suite of enterprise applications that sit on top of the network, and there's two main areas that we have. One is called Pay, which essentially is end-to-end enterprise payments. You can almost think about it like a PayPal for the Fortune 500, but where as a PayPal for a consumer, it's about you and I connecting and just sending you money. But for the enterprise, it's actually about everything that happens before. They're going to make sure that they legally can send me the money, that I am who I say I am, and I can deliver the goods that I promised to deliver, right? So that's what that platform helped them manage end to end. And then we have Buy, which is essentially private marketplaces. So if you're a big enterprise, you can set up and run your own marketplaces. So you can say, okay, I want to build a marketplace for, let's say, fruit produce or legal services or whatever it is that's your sort of B2B domain. And you manage it yourself. You decide the rates. You decide who can join. What are the criteria for it? So it's a way of becoming enabled as a marketplace operator very, very quickly. So that's what we do for the last guys, and that's what our enterprise applications on top of the platform do.
Interesting. No, that's very cool. So I'm curious to maybe dive a little bit deeper into some of the stuff that you guys actually offer. Kind of the seller, you guys have this invoicing thing that I found really quite interesting, because I think it can be quite challenging invoicing outside of your own country. Sometimes in your own country, but I think invoicing outside of your own country is really challenging. So do you want to talk about what you guys do on that front?
Yeah, so we launched something, we call it Tradeshift Cash. It's built into our invoicing platform. And essentially came out of a pain I felt many times myself also as an entrepreneur. And, whenever you invoice somebody, either, as you say, in your own country or internationally, one of the biggest pain points you typically have is just getting paid, right? And sometimes it takes 30, 60 days, 90 days to get paid. And what we looked at is to say, well, it's actually kind of funny, because as a consumer, we have credit cards and we can, if you pay a merchant, he gets paid immediately. But as a consumer, we don't have to pay until later. But the moment we're a business, it's very different, right? As a business, you have to take the credit. There's nobody in between. So we decided the system we call Tradeshift Cash, and it means if you're using our platform to invoice a known customer that's on our system, and we're expanding that list all the time, we will pay you within 24 hours of you sending the invoice, plus a small fee. And then after what would be the normal business terms, 60 days or 90 days or whatever, we will then get the money from the customer. So it's sort of like credit cards, but for businesses, and it's built into the invoicing process. So you can get your capital immediately. And for a lot of companies, that's kind of life or death, right? I mean, if you're a contractor or you're somebody else providing services and you have to wait 90 days for your money, well, that's 90 days where you're not hiring more people or growing your business. But with the cash platform, you can get access to that capital immediately.
Interesting. No, that's actually really quite fascinating. And it's always kind of shocked me how complicated it is to get paid.
Yeah. And we solved it so simply for consumers, right? You never go into a store and think, oh my God, how am I going to pay these guys? I mean, yes, you sometimes think that because you don't have enough money, but
sure.
But you don't think about, oh my God, I wonder if I can use credit cards here, or if I have to write a check, or maybe I have to give him you don't go through all of this. You just assume that as a consumer, you assume that your payment means will always work as long as you have capital, right?
Yeah.
And in B2B, it would be like if you went into a store and you're about to buy something and the guy says, do you want 30 days or 60 days and 2% or 5%? Why would we go through all of this? We don't. And with Tradeshift, we're completely simplifying that so you don't have to either. It's like being a consumer, send your invoice, get paid, and we take care of the rest.
Interesting. So then how do you guys monetize the platform?
So we monetize in two ways, right? So our big enterprise customers, they obviously pay, and that's a software as a service business like Salesforce or Workday, any other business, right? And they pay for using our software, which is valuable to them. And then on the other side of the table, on the seller side, we have this very, very simple rule, which is we will never charge unless we create value, right? So it's free to join the platform. You can go join right now. It's totally free. You can use it. But let's say you want to use our cash service and get paid instantly on all our, your invoices. We will take a fee out of that financing, right? So a little bit like your credit card, you pay an interest, for getting that credit. So I think, we monetize when we create value, and that's our rule for sellers and small companies all over the world.
Interesting. No, because I guess just to kind of make sure people 100% understand the platform kind of at least at a high level, because you guys do a ton of stuff for people, and if people are interested, they can really go to tradeshift.com and check it all out. But if I have physical products and or services, I could basically post them up online for free, and then unless I'm a huge enterprise, then basically you guys take a cut of certain things as I make money through the platform. Is that kind of a very simplified version of what you guys do?
Absolutely right, but you don't even need to join the marketplace. You might just using it as an invoicing tool. I think most companies, have to send out invoices. You can start there, right? But then you can sort of layer in all of these other layers as you get more comfortable. But that's I think a very good simplified way of thinking about it.
Very cool. And I'm just looking through kind of the interface and the stuff that you guys have kind of built. Like it's very kind of simple to use, and you guys did a really good job at kind of laying things out, and I'm pretty sure that doesn't really seem to be that big of a learning curve. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely right. So what we have done is we again took all of our cues from consumer software. I think most enterprise software out there gets built from the perspective of all of these complex rules with the buyer, right? So if you're working inside a big company and you're responsible for buying some software,
okay,
you want to make sure that you do a good job, right? You want to make sure you have to get as many features as possible, right? So you have huge spreadsheets where you record all of the features of a provider, and then you compare all of the bidders of that software to see how good they are. And unfortunately, what that really leads to is software that's super complex to use, because all of the software providers, they're trying to raise to just put more bells and whistles in. And the reality is 60% of that is never used. So you get something from the end user perspective that's extremely complex. So we went with a different mindset and said, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could remove all of the features that weren't needed and make the interface as simple as possible for the end user when they have to use the software? Which is sort of how you think in the consumer world, right? I mean, Instagram can probably not be any simpler than it is, right? I mean, it's just a minimum amount of buttons. And that's exactly the same strategy we're taking for all of the enterprise software we're building.
Got you. The other thing that I think you guys do really unique is the Go credit card. Do you want to talk about that, and what exactly is that?
So we started out to Go. It's a product that allows you to use virtual credit cards to pay for things if you have a business. Okay. And what that means is whenever you need to sign up for a new service, let's say you're getting a new piece of software, it costs $9 a month or something, you can use Go to create a virtual credit card just for that service. And it can't be abused, it can't be used anywhere else. And it's on the fly. Or let's say, you have somebody, a sales guy who's in the field, and maybe he's at a conference and the TV that they were supposed to show the product on is broken and they need a new one. He can take a picture of that TV and say, I need a new TV. It's around $400. I'm going to go pick it up around the corner. And you can just real-time issue a credit card to him with $400 on that he can go and use to pay. So what this does is it takes out all of the friction of having to do your expenses. If you're working at a big company, you know how much expenses suck. But it's also a way of large companies to just manage and make it super easy to reconcile all of the payments you have, because you're literally generating a credit card per payment. So we built this platform. It's called Go. It's super, super simple, very lightweight. And the best news is it's actually completely free to use. So we have a deal with the credit card companies right now. The primary relationship we have in North America is American Express.
Oh, very cool.
And so you can, if anybody have a company and they have credit cards and they think it's an issue to manage this, you go check it out. And we thought we were going to build it for small companies and medium companies. That'd be a great way for them to sort of just handle their payments in the simple way. But what we found out is that huge companies, they love it too. Because they have this problem times 10,000, right? So whenever you have a large company, you just have the same problem, just much, much bigger.
Interesting. No, for sure. Like, I've always kind of worked at kind of medium to, or like small to medium kind of size companies. And we had the problem, right, with credit cards, just if you have even like 10, 12, 15 people. So I can't even imagine trying to manage hundreds or thousands of people with credit cards. Like, it's just got to be a nightmare for accounting, right?
No, exactly right. And I think especially if you have an accounting department that's already stressed out and then solving a lot of other stuff for you, this is a super easy way to just handle all of the complexity. It's also, and this is something, we've seen over and over, employees, they just love Go. It literally has the highest NPS rating of any of our products. It's above 64, right? So That means that everybody would pretty much recommend the software to their friends. And that's how we try to make software, right? We try to make something that creates value and easy to use for people.
No, makes total sense. So you brought up something kind of early on in the conversation, blockchain. Obviously, when you guys started Tradeshift, blockchain wasn't really a thing. How do you think that fits into Tradeshift? And how do you think it's kind of matured? Is it mature at this point? What are your thoughts around blockchain?
I think, certain parts of blockchain is probably going to be the next WeWork. But I think other parts are, going to be pretty amazing and solve really big problems for people. I'll give you one example, right? Okay. An area that I think is really, really, really amazing. And I'm sometimes known to be a little skeptical, but I'll actually start by pointing out something I think is really, truly amazing of blockchain. So I think something like remittances, right? For all of the people who comes from emerging economies that goes overseas to earn money and send them back to their families, which is a huge, huge thing all over the world. Yeah. And pretty much is running whole economies and keeping people fed and families and children in school, all of these things. It used to be to do remittances. Sometimes the fees were 20, 30, 40% to send your money back to the country you came from. And I think there's a number of blockchain solutions out there that has pretty much made that free and instant, right? So that's a case, I think, of really creating good for the world. I think it's a use case that's awesome because it's cross-border and it's, between a lot of different players, right? And you cut out all the middlemen and you just make it very simple to work. So I think that's fantastic, right? I think the other areas where blockchain sometimes is like a technology in search of a problem, right? If I went to my customers and say, hey, we can use blockchain to run all of your payments, and it's super awesome, the first thing they would tell me is, that's fine, but if it doesn't work, who do we sue? Yeah, and we would say like, well, blockchain is decentralized and, everybody's responsible and nobody's responsible. And, most Fortune 500 companies in the world, they would say, no, thank you. Yeah. Right. So because they want to make sure that they don't have a legal risk or any other kind of risk. So I think that's one thing where, if you're in control of the problem end to end, like if you're a Fortune 500 company and you know who you're doing business with and you have that managed relationship, regular cloud technologies are probably better. But if it's what we call a multi-stakeholder problem where you have a lot of different parties. So one example could be like supply chains in the food area, right? So let's say you sell a food product somewhere in the world and maybe there's 12, 15 different parties that touch this product before it goes from you to the shelf of the consumer. But you're on the hook for the quality, right? How do you manage that whole process, make sure everybody along the way interacts? It can be very complicated to tell everybody just use one piece of software. But their blockchain can really help you keep track of that. So you can make a blockchain where you say, okay, every single time somebody takes this produce, you check it in and out of the blockchain. You know exactly who had it for how long, and then there was passed on with the next guy and the next guy and so on. So let's say you are in the supermarket in China. It's really awesome that you can then scan the QR code. And we actually did a project like this with WeChat in China. You can scan the QR code of the goods in the supermarket. And you can see, oh, wow, this is actually coming from North America. We can even see what field this cow was raised on. That's cool. And what farmer had it, right? So I think those are really cool use cases. But unfortunately, I also think some of the hype is getting a little bit in the way of the stuff that really works.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's interesting because a lot of people won't admit that, right? But I'm happy that you said that because, that's fair. So I want to go back to Tradeshift from the developer's perspective for a couple of minutes here. I don't want to dive too technical, but you guys have basically built a whole developer portal where people can reference your APIs. You even built a whole design framework. Do you want to talk about how developers can leverage Tradeshift inside their apps and other uses that people can use?
Yeah, so I think it's back to the same thing as I just mentioned before, with the idea that we would take all of these lessons from the consumer world, right? So, before we started, if you wanted to go and write an application that worked with one of the big pieces of enterprise software, good luck. I mean, they'll be like, oh yeah, it'll take 2 years and you'll have to pay like $10 million in fees just to get started, right? And what that actually meant is that it held back innovation, right? Because
totally.
Imagine, if you can, let all of these creative minds and all of these people who have great ideas build stuff and create value, right? So when we created Tradeshift, we put out immediately an API so third parties could develop, and we didn't know what they would come up with, right? We were just like, if you want to access, the value and build stuff that works on top of the network, you can do that. And within the first few months, we had people who had apps that did credit checks of somebody you're about to invoice. We had apps that helped you figure out where certain things were in the world. We have today apps that do stuff like if you're about to ship goods, you can calculate the carbon footprint of that, and even included to the end consumer and tell them this is my carbon footprint of delivering these services, right? So, and if we had to build all of that ourselves, it would have taken 100 years.
Sure.
But instead, we have all of this crazy cool innovation going on top of the platform. So it's super awesome, but it's also very hard because it means that whenever you're building something yourself, you need to put yourself into the mindset of an app developer.
Yeah.
You can't just build stuff for you, right? You almost need to think it through 2 or 3 times. And since you don't know all of the use cases for how people will do with it, it's very hard in the beginning. It takes a long time before it really works, but now it works amazingly.
No,
I would say one more.
Keep going. Sorry.
Go on.
No, go ahead.
No. I'll talk like very fast. But other thing. Go on.
Go. No, because I'm going to change the topic slightly. So keep going.
Okay. I'll just wrap it up and then say, the other thing, if you are a developer and you think, what can we use the Tradeshift platform for? Like, let's imagine you have an app where you're doing any kind of the business process. Let's say you're, for instance, doing invoicing somewhere in the world, or, you need to invoice your customers. Well, instead of building all of that yourself, just call our API. We will handle global tax compliance for you, all of that stuff. Or if you want to do something where you need any kind of business process inside your app and you need like inventory or whatever else it is, you can just use our platform and we have all of that pre-packaged for you. So we make it a lot simpler to build those things, and you don't need to learn about the tax code in 190 countries, which I really don't recommend anybody doing.
Fair enough. The other thing that I thought was really cool about what you guys are doing for developers is you guys built your own UI library, and not a lot of kind of developer kits have that. Like some do, obviously, but like it's really cool that you guys are basically giving away a lot, if not most of, if not all of your UI components that designers and developers can use as well to match their apps with your app. So it just gives their users a more consistent user experience. Is that kind of fair to say?
Yeah, no, absolutely right. We wanted to make it, we spent a ton of resources on doing user research, building a UX framework, that works on mobile, works on smartphone, that works on all sorts of devices, right?
Sure.
And we thought, right, like if every app developer has to do that from scratch on the Tradeshift platform, it's going to cost them a fortune. And some of the new stuff we're doing with the UX framework is really, really cool, because we started embedding stuff like AI into it as well. So let's say you're an app developer and you have like a drop-down list where you need to select something. If you use our code and our UX framework to do that, you don't just get a drop-down list. We actually get an AI component that will help you sort that list based on how users select from it. So, if every single time you have a drop-down and you select strawberries over blackberries, it'll put strawberries up top. It'll learn from your behavior, right? So it's also a way of making your apps very more intelligent without needing to invest all of the resources in building AI and machine learning.
Interesting. Which
as somebody that's worked on teams building that stuff, takes forever to do, or it can take forever to do, right?
Yeah, no, it's especially everything around machine learning, right? It's difficult to scale and difficult to build.
Yeah.
But consumers are expecting it more and more, and users are expecting more and more. So it's a way just to cut a shortcut, really, for a lot of app developers.
No, that makes total sense. So I'm curious, though, you've obviously been in this space for a long time, and I think we're only going to get more and more connected. Do you have any kind of predictions or thoughts on what's potentially going to happen in the next few years, or just because there's so much kind of, I think, change coming digitally inside and kind of outside of companies? Do you have any thoughts or predictions of things that you could maybe see in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, so first off, I think all of the next generations joining big companies don't expect everything to work like consumers, right?
Yeah.
So there's this idea, when I use software as a consumer at home, it's super awesome, right? If I want to watch something, I just use Netflix. I get immediately what I want. If I want to go somewhere, I use Uber, and it's super easy. I just click 3 buttons, and I'm going wherever I want to go. If I want to eat something, I just use Instacart or, Uber Eats or whatever to get food to me immediately, right? Or so there's all of these just seamless consumer services that are really built to create an outcome for you super, super fast. It's not about the process. It's about creating an outcome. I want to go from A to B. And I think a lot of those next generations, everybody from millennials and down to Generation Z and below that, is going to expect software to work like that. And I think they're going to be a little disappointed in the beginning, right? So if I have one prediction, is that the software we use at work will go from being pretty lame to being pretty awesome. Because of the demands of the next generation of workforce, right? I think the other big thing to watch out for is really, as I talk about, everything being global. There's this weird schizophrenia right now. If you turn on the TV, if you turn on CNN or wherever you turn on, all you'll hear about is like trade war and political chaos and U.S. China and U.S. Europe and trade war, right?
Yeah.
But it's a complete different than what we see in our private lives, right? Like, I mean, where have you personally experienced the trade war? The answer is nowhere,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I mean, your iPhone doesn't cost more. You go to the grocery, it still costs the same. Like, so what I think is, politicians might talk a lot about this, and they might even implement tariffs and all of these things. But the reality is, we are so connected as end consumers. It's not hitting us as end consumers. It's not like Chinese goods or spices or anything is going off the shelves in your supermarket. It's not like you can't buy, ingredients for Mexican food anymore because of trade war. So we are so connected and so global as consumers. And I think that's only going to increase. And I think, that will decrease a lot of the political leverage that actually is, right? Because, one thing is to talk about it theoretically, but I think, what's probably going to happen is a lot of consumers are going to wake up and figure out that this is actually a bluff. Our real world is not going to change, and it's not changing from this.
Yeah, no, interesting. No, I 100% agree with you. I think it's funny how much of this stuff can affect you, doesn't affect you. But I also think, to your point a few minutes ago, enterprise software for the most part is awful, right? And it's only going to get better because it has to get better, right?
Yeah. If your enterprise application is not as good as Uber or Netflix, which you should compare yourself to, and not like, let's say, SAP or Oracle, then you're going to lose. And that's the new reality, right? And I think, both inside companies, but certainly also inside software companies, people are slowly waking up to this new reality, right?
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, I think in a lot of cases, you could give Apple a lot of credit for kind of kicking off making design really, really important. And I think more and more companies are starting to embrace that, but we still have a long way to go, right? Like from a user experience side of things, right? Like whether you like the iPhone or not, or Apple products or not, like they clearly inspired an entire movement around making things easier to use, look nicer, that kind of thing, right? And the list goes on and on. Do you agree with that, or what are your thoughts around that?
No, absolutely right. And I think, if you think about the sort of shift that happened from before Apple until Apple, right? Windows was about complexity. Windows was about having as many buttons as possible. And I don't remember your old Windows apps. It's just like the more buttons, the better, right?
Yep.
and Steve Jobs, he just killed that, right? I mean, very famously, he killed the keyboard. And everybody's like saying all user research shows that users want a keyboard on a phone. And he says, well, the users don't know what they want. They're wrong,
Yep.
And I think it's a little bit the same here, right? I mean, the same shift is going to happen in enterprise. Right now, we think enterprise software is about having as many buttons as possible. And what we're going to realize is that's still the world of the past, and it's going to change to actually wanting to have as few buttons as possible and making things as easy as possible to do the outcome, right?
Sure. Well, and the other thing, too, that actually is really interesting to me about Tradeshift that, you could tell me if I'm going in the right direction here, is so many companies, whether they're looking to get acquired, pass down, maybe both, or kind of grow into other verticals, or maybe make sure that they don't become obsolete through software, are actually starting to build maybe their own competitors or optimize some sort of things internally through software that can make them more efficient, give them better dashboards, maybe sadly not replace people when they retire, or make people that are doing maybe some of the repetitive tasks automate with software so those people can do maybe more complex stuff. Somebody like a company like Tradeshift and what you guys are building could basically, through your developer APIs and your other kind of solutions, could allow me to build some of that software that I just kind of outlined a lot quicker. Is that...
Yeah, but...
Okay, keep going. Yeah.
No, go. No. So, go on with your question. Sorry, I'll get to it.
Well, I was going to say basically, like, that's why when I kind of heard about you guys, I was actually really quite fascinated, because the barrier to entry to build software, to do whatever you need to do to sell your product or optimize your company, in your case, like from the invoicing standpoint to the kind of credit card standpoint to a handful of other things that we've kind of talked throughout the show and that you guys do, I could basically leverage with my software company or my software company I create tomorrow to do a lot of the things that I kind of outlined. Do you agree with that, or what are your thoughts around that?
No, absolutely right. And I think, we have this thesis inside Tradeshift that a company to survive in the future needs to be adaptive. It needs to be able to change a lot faster, right? In the last 15 years, 50% of the Fortune 500 disappeared, right? I mean, 15 years ago, if somebody told you that Blockbuster was going to be bankrupt within 3 years, you would laugh, right? And what happens is that the world today moves so much faster, so you need to be adaptive, right? And if your software don't allow you to change, if the process is just like, in concrete, how hard it is to change like old school software, it becomes almost impossible to change and move. But what you can do with a platform like Tradeshift is you can make that really, really rapid change, because if you don't like something a certain way works, you can actually just try a different app on the platform to say, hey, maybe we want to do this visualization of our spend data instead of this first one. We like that better. Or guess what? If it's not there what you want, you can just make it yourself. You can work with some of your developer friends or your IT department, and you can build something that does what you need on top of our platform, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel 20 times over.
100%. No, that's actually really quite interesting. But we're kind of coming to the end of the show, so how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information about you guys and any other links you want to mention?
Yeah, so I say, look, just go to tradeshift.com. We have a pretty rich site there. You mentioned several times. If you're a developer, go check out our developer site. If you're working with a big company, go check out our enterprise solutions. If you're a seller or if you're a smaller company, you want to see, just go sign up and try it out. And if you have any questions or you like what you hear here or just want to engage, I'm very, very easy to find. Just go and look at Twitter, search for my name. It'll also be on the podcast. And guess what? If you contact me, if you write to me, I'll respond to you on Twitter I'm pretty famous for that. So really looking forward to having some more conversations from that.
Very cool, man. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you and have a good rest of your day, man.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.